You're lying in bed, bored. So you message a friend to hang out. Maybe you go for a long drive, maybe a restaurant, maybe you go play football. And if nobody's free, you scroll TikTok or load up a game instead. But have you ever wondered how your ancestors had fun? Let's find out. So we start where the records don't exist. We know they had more free time than we do. Studies of hunter-gatherer groups found that adults spent roughly 15 to 20 hours a week to hunt and gather foods. That's less than half the time we spent at work, which leaves a lot of hours in a day with no phone, no screen, no book, and nothing arriving to entertain you. So what did they actually do? We know some of it because they actually left it behind for us to see. Let's start with music, because it's one of the oldest form of culture we have evidence for. In a cave in southern Germany, archaeologists found a flute carved from the wing bone of a vulture, roughly 40,000 years old. 5 finger holes, carefully spaced, with a notched mouthpiece. Other flutes from the same region were carved from mammoth ivory, which is far harder because ivory isn't hollow. Someone had to split it lengthwise, hollow out both halves, cut the holes, and then seal it back together airtight. That's not a happy accident. That's a person who already knows what a flute was and understood music. And here's what that tells you. If someone was making a flute, people were already singing, making rhythm and playing with sounds. You don't invent an instrument out of nowhere. The flute is just the oldest piece of evidence we have for people making music. Then there's the art, and the art is stranger than most people realize. In caves across Europe, there are paintings of horses, lions, bison, and rhinos. Some of them are 30,000 years old or more, painted with shading and perspective by people working deep underground by firelight. But here's the detail that gets me. These weren't just paintings made right at the cave entrance. Some are hundreds of meters in, through narrow passages you have to crawl through in total darkness. Someone crawled into the earth carrying fire and pigment to paint an animal where almost nobody would ever see it. And they didn't go alone. At some sites preserved in the soft clay floor, there are footprints, even small ones. Children were down there too. Alongside the animals, on cave walls all over the world, there's something simpler and somehow more affecting. Handprints. People pressed a palm flat to the rock and blew powdered pigment around it, leaving a negative outline of their own hand. They have been found on every inhabited continent. Some are small enough to belong to children. It's just someone leaving a message saying, "I was here," in a language we still understand instantly. Now let's talk about what people wore, because personal decoration goes back even further than the art. At a site in South Africa, archaeologists found sea snail shells with holes deliberately drilled through them, roughly 75,000 years old, clearly meant to be strung together and worn as jewelry. Someone walked that distance and back, collected shells, and then sat down and carefully drilled each one with a stone tool. It wasn't useful for hunting. They were making something to wear simply because they wanted to look good. Maybe to impress their crush. Ochre shows up in the same picture. Red and yellow mineral pigment ground into powder found at sites going back hundreds of thousands of years, sometimes with the stones and tools to grind it. Some of it was for practical purposes. A lot of it almost certainly wasn't. People were using it to paint their own bodies. So that's music, art, and fashion, most of it older than farming, writing, cities, or the wheel. Now the one we were waiting for. Games. Small carved objects turn up in the record that don't have an obvious practical purpose. Miniature figures. Animal bones were worn smooth in ways that suggest they were handled constantly rather than used as tools. When an object shows wear in the wrong places for work, it makes us wonder what people were actually doing with it. Maybe they were just carrying it around, holding it, or playing with it. Knucklebones from sheep and goats, which have 4 distinct sides and land differently when thrown, appear across a huge range of ancient cultures as gaming pieces and dice. Once you have an object that lands differently every time you throw it, you have a game of chance. And once you have a chance, you have people betting, arguing, and shouting at a small bone like it actually knows what it's doing. Kids probably had toys too. Miniature versions of adult tools show up at various sites, far too small to be useful for actual work. Some were probably practice, some were probably just toys. The line between those two things is thin, and it always has been, because play is how humans learn. Watch any child anywhere on Earth, and they will invent a game with rules, enforce those rules aggressively, and then argue about them. Nobody teaches that. It arrives pre-installed, which tells you how old it is. But the biggest source of fun comes from fire. Anthropologist Polly Wiesner found something interesting while studying the Jew/Huansi hunter-gatherers. During the day, talk is practical. Who saw the tracks where? Who isn't sharing fairly? Complaints, logistics, plans. But at night around the fire, the conversation flips almost entirely into stories. Myths. Stories about ancestors. People doing things that sound impossible. Jokes. Places nobody had ever seen. And that's basically what entertainment was. For generations, people sat around fires, telling stories, making jokes, and listening to the same familiar tales from people they knew. And they were funny. They may sound obvious, but it's worth saying because jokes don't leave fossils behind. We know because the humor survives in customs anthropologists recorded in living communities. In some groups, a hunter who brings back a large animal gets mocked for it by their own people. The meat is called skinny, or they say the hunter just got lucky. It's a joke, and it's also a system because it stops any one person from getting too impressed with themselves. And maybe also stopping something. Pride. There was physical fun too. Wrestling, chasing, throwing contests, dancing. Dancing in particular shows up in nearly every human society ever documented, often for hours, and sometimes going late into the night. Think about what that actually means. These people couldn't afford to waste any energy in a world where they didn't know exactly where their next meal was coming from, and they're choosing to burn energy for nothing. And maybe that's the point. If you can afford to waste energy together having fun, it means you're safe and everyone around that fire knows it. So why does any of this matter? Because none of it was actually pointless. In a world without money or a job or any written agreements, your survival depended entirely on the people around you. You needed people who trusted you, liked you, and were willing to help when things went wrong. Every hour spent telling stories, playing games, dancing, laughing at the same joke was an hour spent holding the group together. Fun wasn't a break from survival. It was one of the things that helped keep the group together when times got hard. And it helped people remember things. A story about an ancestor who crossed a dangerous river could also tell you where not to go. A song with 100 verses is a database. A dance that reenacts a hunt is a training exercise. Before people had writing, entertainment was one of the main ways knowledge got passed down, and one of the only reasons any of it survived is that it was interesting enough to remember. Here's what I keep thinking about, though. Almost everything they did was something they made themselves. They made the flute. They made up the story. They made the joke, the dance, the paint, the beads. Fun was something you produced, usually with other people, usually badly at first, and half the fun was just doing it together. Now look at how we spend our free time. The show is already made. The game is already made. The song is already finished. We just press play and watch, and a lot of the time, we're doing it alone. Neither one is wrong. But it's interesting to think about that for 99% of human history, having fun and being with people were the same activity. They only started separating very recently, so the next time you're lying in bed, bored, scrolling because nobody's free, understand that you're the first generation with that option. For most of human history, people didn't have that option. They sat around fires, told stories, joked around, played games, and made things up together. For hundreds of thousands of years, entertainment meant being around other people. They didn't have a choice. We do. Now we can be completely alone and still have an endless supply of things to watch. That's new. Really new, and we are all still figuring out what it does to us.